Jim Worthwhile considered himself an average guy with average problems. He paid his taxes, grumbled about traffic, and cherished his Saturday morning coffee at Brewtopia, the best bistro in New Avalon City. Not an opinion, but an indisputable fact, as any self-respecting caffeine addict would attest. It was at Brewtopia that he met Jara. She was stunning, in a way that made Jim think he had somehow walked into the wrong movie. Dark hair that shimmered as if kissed by moonlight, hazel eyes that almost glowed, and a way of tilting her head when she listened that made him feel like the most interesting man alive. They hit it off immediately. She laughed at his jokes, genuinely laughed, not the polite kind. She never looked at her phone when he talked, and she could drink espresso like it was oxygen. He fell hard. But then there were the oddities, small things at first, like the time he saw her talking to someone in the bathroom, but when he checked, she was alone. "You must be hearing things," she said with a wink, and life carried on. Or how her hair always seemed to move, just a little too much. At first, he thought it was the wind, then he noticed it inside, no wind, no vents, yet her hair still subtly shifted, sometimes even reaching for things. Jim chalked it up to static electricity, ignored the nagging questions, and focused on being the luckiest man alive. Until the day he came home early, Jim was exhausted. His boss had cut the workday short after the office vending machine exploded, long story, and all he wanted was to sink into the couch and watch something that required 0 brain cells. He stepped inside and immediately froze. Jara was standing in the middle of the living room, deep in conversation, with her hair, which was talking back. It wasn't just moving, it was actively undulating, tendrils forming shapes as it gestured along with her words. And then, in a moment of undeniable horror, the mass of dark locks turned to look at him. Jim dropped his briefcase and promptly passed out. When he came to, Jara was fanning him, so was her hair. Jim managed, Jara sighed. "Well, I guess the hair's out of the bag." Jim sat up, eyes darting between her and her animated locks. Your hair was talking and looking at me. Explain." Jara exhaled. "Okay, short version, I'm not from around here." Jim blinked. "Like another country?" "Like another planet." A long silence stretched between them. Jim briefly entertained the idea that he was dreaming, or concussed, or both. "My species," Jara continued, "shares a symbiotic existence with our sentient hair. It protects us in combat, and, as you saw, it's also fully capable of conversation." Jim opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Your hair is alive, and talks." "Yes." "And you're an alien?" "Yes." Jim took a deep breath. "Okay, this is fine. I'm handling this. You're handling this. Everything's fine." That's when the wall exploded. 4 hulking figures stormed in, heavily armed and looking very much like they wanted to redecorate the apartment in Jim and Jara's blood. Jara didn't hesitate. Defensive mode now. Her hair roared, not metaphorically. It actually let out a sound somewhere between a lion's snarl and an electric shock. The strands stretched outward, glowing with plasma energy. Jim's brain short-circuited. Jara launched into combat, her hair lashing out like 100 whips. One assailant was yanked off his feet. Another got an electrified strand wrapped around his face before being hurled through the broken window. Jim, meanwhile, ducked behind the couch. Blasts of plasma energy filled the room as Jara's hair blocked incoming shots, striking back with calculated precision. Within minutes, the last attacker collapsed, sizzling from the energy tendrils wrapped around his torso. Silence. Jim peeked over the couch. "So, I guess you weren't joking about the combat thing." Jara wiped some alien blood off her cheek. "Nope." Jim stared at the wreckage. "So, any chance we can just explain this to the landlord as a slight misunderstanding?" Jara grabbed his wrist. "No time! More will come!" She dragged him toward the back door. "Wait, where are we?" "I have a spaceship." Jim stopped in his tracks. "You have a what?" Jara pointed. There, sitting in the backyard where Jim's barbecue used to be, was a sleek, obsidian spacecraft. Jim exhaled slowly. "I don't suppose I have a choice here." "Nope." Jara pressed a button on her wrist, and the ship's hatch opened. "Get in." Jim rubbed his temples. "Yeah, okay, sure, why not?" As the ship's doors closed behind them, he muttered, "Best coffee in the whole damn city, and now I'm on the run with an alien princess and her battle-hungry hair. Just another Thursday." Intergalactic +1. The spaceship interior was surprisingly cozy if you ignored the glowing alien tech, the blinking holographic displays, and the faint hum of what Jim assumed was either the engine or a deeply concerned AI. The walls were a sleek black, pulsing faintly like the inside of a living creature. Jim sat in one of the two cockpit seats, gripping the armrests like a man experiencing severe turbulence on a budget airline. Jara, meanwhile, moved with the grace of someone who had definitely done this before. She tapped a glowing interface, and the ship's control panel came to life. "All right, hold tight." Jim scoffed. "Hold tight, hold tight." "Jara, I just found out my girlfriend is an alien with sentient, combat-ready hair. We were attacked by what I can only assume were intergalactic debt collectors, and now I'm sitting in a spaceship in my backyard. At what point was I not holding tight?" Jara gave him a quick peck on the cheek. "Oh, you're adapting already." Before Jim could process that, the ship launched. The sudden acceleration pressed him into his seat so hard he briefly questioned whether his skeleton would remain inside his body. The city skyline blurred below them as they shot upward, breaking the atmosphere in seconds. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure eased. Jim gasped, feeling his weight settle. Oh, that wasn't so bad. Then he looked out the window. His brain shut down for the third time that day, because Earth was now below them, and beyond that, stars everywhere. He was in space, actual, honest-to-God space. Jim managed. Jara, still focused on piloting, smirked. "You're handling this better than I expected." Jim slowly turned to her. "Jara, I passed out earlier because your hair was talking. I am one minor inconvenience away from doing it again." "Good to know." She flipped a switch, and the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. Jim screamed. "Princess problems." Jim sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at Jara. "All right, answers now." Jara sighed. "Okay, I wasn't exactly lying when I said I wasn't from around here. I just left out some details." "Like?" "Well," she hesitated, "I'm technically a princess." Jim buried his face in his hands. "Of course you are." "Not the spoiled kind, if that helps." "It doesn't." Jara continued, "I come from the planet Ventracia. My people, the Ventrasi, are a warrior race. We bond with our hair symbiotes at birth. It gives us enhanced reflexes, heightened perception, and obviously some combat advantages." Jim gestured vaguely at the space around them. "And the guys who just redecorated my apartment." "Bounty hunters," she admitted, "sent by my family." Jim blinked. "I'm sorry, your family?" Jara nodded. "Technically, I was supposed to marry some powerful noble, strengthen alliances, maintain peace, blah, blah, blah." Jim nodded slowly. "And let me guess, you didn't want to marry him." She gave a sheepish smile. Jim exhaled. "So you ran away to Earth?" "Correct." "And now your family sent space assassins after you?" "Also correct." Jim leaned back. "Great, just great." Jara gave him a nudge. "On the bright side, you're now officially dating royalty." "Oh yes," Jim said dryly. "That makes up for all the gunfire." Jara grinned. "See, you're handling it." Jim sighed. "What's the plan?" First, we lose any pursuers, Jara said. Then we find a safe place to figure out our next move. Jim crossed his arms. And what about me? Jara hesitated. Jim narrowed his eyes. You don't have a plan for me, do you? Not yet, Jim groaned. I'm going to die in space. Jara patted his arm. Nay, probably. Jim slumped in his seat. I should have just stayed at Brutopia. Surprise space chase. Just as Jim was starting to accept his fate as an intergalactic fugitive by association, the ship's alarms blared. Jara's eyes snapped to the radar. Damn it, we've got company. Jim turned to the view screen. Behind them, a massive warship was closing in. Jim let out a weak laugh. So, what are the odds they just want to talk? Jara's hair bristled. Slim. Jim paled. Neat. Love that for us. The warship fired. Jara yanked the controls, sending their ship into a tight barrel roll. The plasma blast barely missed, illuminating the cockpit in a blinding flash. Jim clutched the armrest. We're all gonna die. Jara grinned. Not yet. She flipped a series of switches. The ship suddenly jerked backward, narrowly dodging another blast. Jim's stomach violently protested. Can this thing shoot back? Jim yelped. Of course. Jara punched a button. From the ship's exterior, sleek turrets unfolded, locking onto their pursuers. With a deafening whump, a volley of plasma rounds launched at the enemy vessel, forcing them to swerve. Jim pumped his fist. Ha! Take that, you! The warship deployed fighter drones. Jim's fist slowly lowered. I hate everything about this. Jara cursed. We need to jump to hyperspace. Jim threw up his hands. Then do it. The engine needs time to recalibrate. How much time? Jara checked the readout. About 30 seconds. Jim pointed at the very angry drones gaining on them. We don't have 30 seconds. Jara grinned. That's where you're wrong. Before Jim could ask what she meant, her hair shot forward, wrapping around the weapons console. The tendrils manually operated the turrets, firing wildly at the incoming drones. Jim gawked. Your hair can pilot the ship? Multitasking, babe? Jara winked. The ship weaved between enemy fire, Jara's hair continuing to fire back with frightening precision. One drone exploded, then another. Jim watched in awe. This is simultaneously the most impressive and terrifying thing I've ever seen. Jara smirked. Told you dating me would be exciting. Jim laughed despite himself. Yeah, but I was expecting, fun road trips, maybe a spontaneous vacation, not a dogfight in space. The ship's hyperdrive whined. Jara punched the throttle. Time's up, hold tight. Jim barely had time to grab his seat before the ship jumped into hyperspace, the stars stretching into long, glowing lines. Then silence. Jim exhaled. Did we? We lost them, Jara confirmed. Jim's entire body went limp. Oh, thank every deity in existence. Jara grinned. See, you survived. Jim groaned. Barely. Jara patted his knee. Welcome to space, Jim Worthwhile. Jim slumped in his seat. I need a drink. Jara smirked. Good news, we're headed to a space bar. Jim blinked, then sighed. Of course we are. Welcome to the Star Skewer Cantina. Jim followed Jara into the Star Skewer Cantina, feeling like he had just walked into a bar fight mid-swing. The air was thick with smoke, laughter, and the unmistakable scent of alien liquor, some of which appeared to be sentient and very upset about being consumed. The clientele ranged from the mildly strange to the outright horrifying. Over at the bar, a tentacled creature was chugging something that bubbled ominously. A floating orb, wearing a cowboy hat, hummed a country tune. Meanwhile, a six-armed lizard man was arm-wrestling himself at a corner table, and losing. Jim swallowed hard. So, any chance they have beer? Regular, non-glowing, won't make my eyeballs melt beer? Jara smirked. Stick close, Worthwhile, you're not in Kansas anymore. Jim sighed. I was never in Kansas. Exactly. Jara led him to the bar, where a bartender with 4 eyes and what looked like actual bark for skin leaned over. "What'll it be?" Jim hesitated. What do you have that won't kill me?" The bartender squinted. "Human, huh?" He reached under the counter and pulled out a dusty bottle labeled mild poison for lesser species. Jim paled. "That does not sound—" Jara snatched it, gave it a sniff, and nodded approvingly. "You'll live." Jim took a cautious sip. It tasted like whiskey had been in a car accident. "Smooth," he coughed. Jara took a swig of her own drink, a glowing blue concoction that hissed when it touched the air. "We need to lay low for a bit. My family won't stop sending bounty hunters, but this place is neutral ground. No weapons, no assassinations, no intergalactic vendettas. It's the perfect spot to regroup." Jim glanced around. "I feel so safe." Before Jara could respond, a very large, very angry alien stomped up behind them. Jim froze. Oh no. The creature was at least 8 feet tall, covered in thick, glistening exoskeleton armor, with a pair of mandibles clicking in what Jim instinctively knew was the universal language of "you're in trouble." It leaned down, its voice a deep, rattling growl. "Princess Jara of Ventracia." Jara sighed. "Can I not get through one drink before someone tries to abduct me?" Jim whispered, "Remember when you said no weapons, no assassinations?" "Yeah. And yet—" He gestured at the very armed bounty hunter. The alien growled again. "The royal family has placed a substantial bounty on your return. Come quietly, or I will—" Jara's hair lashed out, wrapping around his arm and yanking him forward. Before he could react, she flipped him over the bar. He crashed onto a table, shattering it instantly. The entire bar went silent. Jara dusted off her hands. "Anyone else?" Jim stared. "I feel like that broke at least 3 bar rules." The bartender sighed, grabbed a wooden club, and leaned over the counter to whack the unconscious alien on the head. "5th one this week." He looked at Jara. "You paying for the table?" She grinned. "Put it on my tab." The bar resumed as if nothing had happened. Jim rubbed his temples. "I need another drink." Jara laughed. "Welcome to your new life worthwhile." Jim groaned. "I miss Brutopia." Jara patted his back. "Cheer up, you're dating a princess." Jim exhaled. "Yeah, and now there's a galactic price on my head." Jara grinned. "See, told you dating me would be exciting." Jim took another sip of his mild poison for lesser species. "Next time, let's just go to the movies."